Hello guys, this is your friend Saiyan Paradox Audio Fanfic and we are back in new fanfic. What if future Trunks was born a girl? Dragon Ball Z Alternate Timeline Part 1. Trunks Arc. Anticipation. Hi. Welcome to this thing. Content warning for identity crisis, but there won't be any gender dysphoria. This Trunks is female, a woman, and isn't trans, but she's also been forced to be male ping. As such, pronouns will be switched around depending on whose point of view we follow, and she will be misgendered a lot, and that's on purpose and by design, that's part of the plan. No ships, but plenty of unrequited crushes. This story will cover 5 major arcs: the Trunks arc, Android arc and Cell arc, which together are known as the Android Saga, as well as 2 extras that are secret winking face. Because English doesn't allow me to fully convey Keigo speech, nor am I great at conveying a certain level of formality in a language that's not my native one, I will be using honorifics in this fiction and use how characters address each other in Japanese rather than in the Western dubs, i.e. Bulma calls Goku Sun-kun, and Goku calls her Bulma-san. I won't be using any other Japanese words though, so no, baka, kasen, and so on in here. The Rocky formations weren't the same 20 years in the past, yet the coordinates matched. The air-cut sound reached the time traveler's ears while practicing swordsmanship. Might as well get some katas in, keep the body busy, focused, and ease the stress caused by this strange, days-long anticipation. A fierce battle would take place here in a few hours, Trunks knew as much. And yet, despite the knowledge of how it would end, the halfling was anxious. Anticipation was the absolute worst feeling. The cyborgs could and would strike anywhere, at any time, everyone was on high alert at all times, and eventually, they became part of their routine. It wasn't the first hardship the planet had faced, but soon enough, the armed forces were decimated and nobody took down these monsters. The king hadn't been able to locate the young boy who saved them from Piccolo Daimao, and the alien menace who destroyed parts of East City, Nappa and Vegeta, vanished after their initial strike. So people started to live again, so to speak, and listened to the radio to salvage what could be salvaged. Cyborg drills were taught, some even denied their existence. Bulma recollected how after a couple of months of unopposed terror, insurance companies and banks put cyborg-related clauses in their contracts. Then, it was for all sorts of warranties. Cyborg-related damages will not be covered. However, after a solid 10 years of this charade, the infrastructure damages were too much and society at large more or less collapsed. Earthlings went into survival mode. Trunks was used to survival mode. Always alert, little, irregular, restless sleep, always on the move, bunkers, rationing food, scavenging, dealing with militias, and rushing to the points of impact, helping people find shelter and hide, roaring them, freeing them from their prisons of concrete, waiting for Gohan to fight the monsters, so the surviving Earthlings could flee in relative safety. Sometimes they'd both arrive when the cyborgs were still enjoying the city, sometimes they were late and there was no one to save. The longer Gohan, and then Trunks, could hold them, keep them busy, keep them amused, the more people could evacuate and find shelter. The cat and mouse game was dreadful, and both Gohan and Trunks more or less managed to read the mood of the killing machines, and adjust their encounter strategies in consequence. Or try to, at least. Failure had meant the loss of a limb, and upon realization, Gohan decided to not risk his pupil's life the following encounter, at the cost of his own life. Trunks rubbed her eyes at the painful memory and tightened the grip on her sword. It just so happens that time travel wasn't exactly a peer-reviewed, reliable science. A trip to a city nearby, and a quick look at the news and weather reports confirmed her fears, and what her watch had told her, she'd arrived a couple of days early. So she had to purchase some supplies to set up camp. Leave it to Mother to plan for all possible outcomes, she mused as she paid with an old Zenny pre-charged card Bulma had given her. Not that they were of any use back home. The house now secured in a capsule had been perfect for the grim, silent and lonely wait. The convenience store meals lasted long enough for the few days she would be staying, so she didn't need to go back to the city after her initial scouting mission. Minimum interaction was Plan A. They had everything planned, up to and including a fairly acceptable way to hide her identity, if things turned wrong. The short hairstyle and a binder under her tank top should do the trick anyway. Surely, a spike of energy would attract the whole gang, and especially him. She hoped she could catch Goku alone after the fight she knew would happen right here, and leave unnoticed, but extra precaution was needed to protect her own existence. Always prepare Plan B, C, D and E. Plan A is always the best-case scenario that will not resist contact with reality, the wise and paranoid mantra spoken by Bulma echoed. Plan B was the reason why she had also sent the precious medicine to 3 different laboratories with a detailed genome of the virus. Plan C was the reason why she came equipped. Another swing of her sword against a ghost, and Trunks remembered why she'd kept her hair short, her chest bound. 18 had shown particular cruelty towards women, especially those with long beautiful hair, as hers never grew, and neither Gohan nor Bulma managed to discourage the halfling's desire to fight. Binding also had the grim benefit of keeping broken ribs in place, as long as it wasn't too tight, and it was easier to make, maintain and repair than find a proper bra in her era. She'd have to actually gender herself as male, however, and not let others assume as they usually did. Trunks never cared how people addressed her. If you have to fight and he sees you, a Super Saiyan woman, things will get ugly, Bulma had told her. Trunks was torn. On the one hand she hoped to see her father, a father she only knew of from her mother's sparse words and one lone, stolen picture. On the other hand, everything she knew about him screamed meeting him was a terrible idea, he would never accept her existence, let alone her existence as his child. She was explicitly told to not get her hopes up. The former was her heart's preference, despite the pain, and she'd practiced answering to masculine language and perfected her gait, just in case Plan A and B failed. Dread came upon her as she felt immense energies approaching, energies that should have been closely followed by another, friendlier and stronger one. The time hour wasn't exact either, but that might have been a detail lost in Bulma's memory. Trunks sheathed her sword and hid near rocky formations as she extended her awareness, and sensed the arrivals. She hadn't been the soul to notice the arrival of the Frieza force, as expected. A key in particular, much fainter than in her memories, strengthened her resolve. Trunks had arrived a couple of days earlier than planned, but it was for the best, as Frieza, his father and their forces arrived hours before anticipated. With no trace of Goku yet and not wanting to risk anyone's life, Trunks decides to take charge. Trunks could feel her mentor or at least a younger version of him and her mother's friends approach, then disappear. They'd lowered their ki so as to not be noticed by the aliens, and continued by foot. Bulma was also among them, but her ki couldn't be sensed, with all the different energies coming towards their location being much stronger. Trunks only knew what was going on their end because Bulma had told her the story once more before departing. The alien ship was in view and had started landing maneuvers. Trunks figured she'd put names and faces on the energies she felt at another time. And still no trace of Goku. Plan A looked more and more unlikely. Great. Trunks moved swiftly, keeping her own energy suppressed, and crouched as she observed the alien forces exit the ship. Bulma hadn't been able to describe to her what the tyrant looked like, but Gohan actually did, as he recounted the horrible week he'd spent on Namek. At the tender age of 5, one night he and Trunks were out foraging. Even without a description, the two aliens clearly acted in charge of the troops and were powerful enough to be identified. She heard some of the words spoken, carried by the wind, and a second later, acknowledgement from the troops. There was no way Trunks would let her unknowing allies, especially her mother, be endangered, let alone the rest of the planet should any of these monsters get to their destination. Certainly Vegeta could take care of the soldiers, but it was too risky, and he and the group could become Frieza's target if they revealed themselves. Son Goku-san should have been here, but he wasn't. To conduct whatever orders they received, the soldiers flew off, or at least began to. They didn't make it far, their slaughtered limbs promptly falling back on what was now the battlefield. The metallic sound of the tip of the sword scratching the rocks underneath drew the remaining soldiers, Frieza's and King Cold's eyes on the Earthling that was the cause of the carnage. Trunks faced them with a blank expression, knowing she was as strong as Goku was at the time, if not more so, and while their power was impressive, hers was much more so. For once, it was a one-sided fight in her favor. You must be Frieza, Trunks affirmed with a cold, wary, unflinching stare. Oh, so even in such a remote world, my reputation precedes me. How fortunate, the tyrant mocked with a smile. I'm here to kill you, was the restrained response. You all die right here, right now. Frieza never responded well to threats, and promptly gave the command. A blast flew towards the Earthling, but it was deviated, and the owner of the weapon didn't survive long enough to feel his back break on the ship's body. The punch had broken through the fish-like soldier bones with ease. Trunks looked at her bloodied knuckles a brief instant, and a heartbeat later, the rest of the soldiers who had charged met a similar fate. She didn't care to hear Frieza and Cold compliment her strength, for an Earthling. You're next. Listen, and listen well, she smeared the blood of her knuckles with her trembling fingers. Unlike Son Goku-san, I will show you no mercy. If you attack me, it better be with all your might. Son Goku, is that the name of the Saiyan? Yes, Papa, Frieza answered his father with malice. Torturing and ending this planet's inhabitants while waiting for the arrival of the Super Saiyan will keep me busy for a couple of hours, and he'll return to a dead homeworld. I'll start with you, since you're so kind to present yourself as the first volunteer dead man. He'll suffer last. A miscalculation, Trunks cut with a confident smile. Oh, believe me, I am more than capable of purging a planet in such a short period of time. Oh, not that. Trunks corrected the information, but didn't care to correct the man part. Good. Her cover worked. I meant the part where there is only one Super Saiyan. They had their chance, but they had decided to talk instead. Their funeral. As she started to build power, conjuring the horrors of her world, eyes locked with her enemies, Trunks traded caution in favor of raw power and brutality. She could almost feel the fear in Frieza's eyes, the memory of his battle with Son Goku on Namek plaguing his mind as her pupils disappeared, her iris changed from blue to teal, her hair rose, and the golden aura surrounded her body. It's the same eyes. Frieza spoke in realization. This Earthling wasn't bluffing. I told you, you die right here, right now. The growled threat was cold, tired, bored even. Frieza immediately retaliated with an energy blast in her direction which exploded and alerted the others that the battle had begun. Something in Trunks wanted to feed off the fear she'd caused by transforming, to make them suffer, especially because of the nightmares the tyrant had caused to her mentor, to a father she never knew, both of whom were nearby. The Super Saiyan transformation was thirsty for blood and destruction, the longer and more painful, the better. Everyone was approaching, their kiss rising in response to the fight that had started. She knew she needed to be fast if she wanted to salvage any hopes of disappearing before they saw her. The smoke on her previous position slowly cleared, revealing her absence, and she heard King Cold's laugh at her apparent demise. If that's coming at full force, and if that is what scared Father and Gohan-san, I'm disappointed. The invasive thought was ignored. She charged her ki and placed her hands in front of her, looking through the diamond formed by her indexes and thumbs, and shot towards the pair of aliens. The pair split and jumped out of the way as they felt the blast coming their way. This was the opportunity she was looking to create with her attack, and a moment later she fell on King Cold, sword held firmly above her. She sliced straight through him. And again. And a couple of other times, for good measure. Fried bacon strips would be nice. Cold's body was blasted, leaving nothing but dust in the wind and the smell of burnt flesh and armor. Her teal eyes never left Frieza's red ones all throughout the brutal execution, and the halfling could taste the fear irradiating from her enemy. She charged him with a roar, her sword held back in her right hand, and her left arm front. Frieza's hand met her forearm to stop the charge, but the strength behind was too much, and they crashed down further away from the ship's landing site. The force of impact created one of those all too common craters she and Gohan had made when they'd been on the receiving end of a similar alt. Frieza tried to push away, but the struggle was cut short as the metal stabbed right through his neck, impaling on the ground. He gargled in agony. As the grip on her forearm loosened and life left the tyrant, with wide open eyes, Trunks knew it was over. With the regards of Prince Vegeta's daughter, she whispered a parting and oh so satisfying message, and cut through and through to separate the head from the body. Trunks leapt off and blasted the remains with her left hand, just in case, and gave the same treatment to the spaceship. Just in case. Destroying things scratched the Super Saiyan desire for violence itch, but it was far from enough. The time traveler contemplated the result of her actions an instant, her mind slowly focusing on things that weren't the immediate threat, doing her best to shut down the desire for more. She took some distance from the field and landed on a slightly higher stone formation in the middle of the smoke and dust winds. Something slipped through the cracks, she was certain. Dad. She turned to the voice, a small child's voice who was coming running towards her position, clouded by the smoke and dust lifted by the destruction of the Frieza Force mothership. Ah, that fell through the cracks. Plan A, you'll be missed. Trunks looked at the silhouette of the child coming her way, the child that would become her mentor, confident, closest friend, the child that was running towards him with tears in his eyes and arms wide open, and who leapt against her without restraint. Trunks didn't hear Gohan's cries of joy, how he'd missed his father, but the sudden contact, the kindness and warmth made the transformation vanish from the teen. Gohan realized quickly that this person wasn't his father and jumped off in horror. You're not my father, mister, he confirmed in a dreadful whisper and took a step back, a sudden realization hitting him. Gohan didn't know this person, and this person was armed and powerful. Trunks put a knee on the ground to be at the child's level, bloodied sword lowered, and smiled softly. No, I am sorry, but he will be here soon. She tried to comfort this boy she knew was what 7. The blood on her hands and weapon weren't exactly roaring, but her tone and intent rang true. Their short-lived conversation was interrupted by a man's voice. Get away from him. She looked up at the rest who landed behind Gohan, thankfully just late enough to have missed the boy's faux pas, hug. Of course Gohan had shot up first when the Super Saiyan signature key erupted. And of course, the short bald man in orange GI with monk markings on his forehead was the one with the bravado to order her to leave Gohan alone. Trunks gave the boy a last glance, then stood and took a step back, pulling a handkerchief from her pants pocket to wipe off the blood from her weapon and sheath it, making a point to show herself as little intimidating as possible. The fight was over and she was an ally of sorts. While she was wiping her hands off with the tissue, she took a moment to look at the group of people that were now in clear view. The dust and smoke had settled down. Closest to her was Gohan, in what she recognized was a Frieza soldier armor and the messy, sun, hair, longer than in her memories. Krillin, the bald short man, Goku's closest friend, the man whose death caused the Saiyan's ascension to begin with. Yamcha, sporting a similar GI and a scar, whom Bulma spoke of in contradicting statements. Puer, a shapeshifter cat who flew near them. Piccolo, the tall and imposing green alien with a turban, a cape and a purple GI. Chaozu and Tenshinhan, two former tournament rivals of Goku's, something about different schools, with strange psychic abilities for the former, and grand martial arts prowess and a third eye for the latter. Bulma, with a fresh blue permed mane and curious, lively blue eyes. Her future version never took the time to take care of her hair. Trunks hoped this version would never grow stress white hairs as her own mother did. With that hair, Bulma was as tall as Trunks, and the time traveler had to repress a smile at the observation. And finally, the ball of aggressivity sporting civilian clothes, she'd seen that pink shirt before. Spiky, flame-like hair, a scowl she often saw in the mirror, tense muscles. Without his hair, he was shorter than her. They all looked back at Trunks, and saw a teenager with light, short-curtain unkempt lavender hair, wary and jaded blue eyes, a capsule corp denim jacket perhaps a size too big, thick black tank top, gray baggy pants with a few pockets and muted yellow flat boots. Calloused hands in a fairly lean but fit physique, and the sword on her back completed the arguably less than fashionable look. Son Goku-san will be arriving in a couple of hours, according to my intel. She gestured vaguely at the ship's remains to indicate that it was the source of her information, and put the stained tissue back into her pocket. She then fixed her jacket, dusted off and tried her best to contain her nerves. She checked her watch to confirm the time frame. 3 hours or so, she added and pulled a capsule holder from her jacket pocket, taking one and tossing it. Yamcha warned his friends about something dangerous being used, but once the poof cleared, the mini fridge Trunks had originally packed for the trip threatened no one. She knelt to it, opened it and grabbed a can, then moved aside. Please help yourselves, if you intend on waiting here with me, she invited with as much warmth as she could, and opened her cold coffee. It was the middle of August, after all. Bulma accepted the offer, approaching and commenting on the model. Gohan accepted as well, and picked a fruit juice he'd never seen before. Krillin gave in to the thirst seeing Bulma and Gohan state how delicious the drinks were. Trunks' eyes lingered on the young versions of her mother and mentor while they took their drink and enjoyed it. Have we met before? You look familiar, Bulma commented with a pointed look to the jacket, and Trunks slightly shook her head to deny. We haven't. This was a gift. She left it at that, but of course, one question led to another. So, you know my father, Mr. Gohan was such an innocent child. Trunks made a little negative sound. I only heard a lot about him, she briefly clarified. And you were a Super Saiyan when you killed Frieza and the other big one, right? An innocent but perceptive and straight to the point child. Plan B was on the chopping blocks. Or was it Plan C? I was. Trunks confirmed but gave no explanation. Stop pretending. Vegeta of course loathed the idea of another Super Saiyan that wasn't him, as expected, and especially one he didn't know about. Only 4 of us survived the destruction of our planet, and out of those, 2 are dead. Kakarot, myself, and this half-breed here are the last with our blood. You can't be a Saiyan. Who are you? And where did you get that power? Trunks took a minute. She wouldn't dare interrupting the man. Vegeta may not have been done with his questions, and despite his rough words, she could see others wanted to hear an answer. So she braced herself. I'm afraid I cannot disclose this information, yet. My apologies, Vegeta-san. She added, tilting her head to emphasize the apology. Not that it would soothe the past version of her father, who was unfazed by her knowledge of his name. He was going to press the issue, of course. The hell you are. All Saiyans have black hair and eyes, the prince growled. There was nothing she could say that wouldn't come out as a blatant lie, and everyone would pick up on it. She broke eye contact and looked away, unable to comment. But he did transform and won easily, Gohan defended when Trunks didn't respond. The others nodded. That mystery would remain a secret as long as it could. I'm calling the brat a liar, not a weakling, Vegeta spat out with disdain. Bulma changed the topic to one that's less contentious, or so she hoped. So who are you, actually, what's your name? You look pretty young, too. Trunks felt color blush her cheeks, the same colors she had when her mother interrogated her on her whereabouts when she sneaked out at night. Her fingers trembled a little, so she gripped her can slightly more firmly. I cannot give you my name, Bulma-san, but she paused for an instant to consider the time flow at home instead of the actual date, and added with a warmer smile, a facade of sorts to soothe everyone's curiosity, a truth that could be shared without consequences. I will be turning 17 in a few weeks. Her age didn't matter in the grand scheme of things, considering her circumstances. Even your name's a secret? Yamcha asked incredulously, but Bulma just shooed him off. Cut the kid some slack, Yamcha. He just saved us all and the planet. Let him be secretive if he wants. Stop putting him in the spotlight like that, and she winked at Trunks with mischief and familiarity. Trunks was thankful for the help, but it wasn't worded. Too much social activity in too little time, and the fight hadn't been satisfying. Darkness was clawing at her soul. Tenshinhan and Chaozu also commented on the weirdness of keeping a simple thing such as a name a secret, especially as the teenager seemed to know who they were. Trunks was worried. If her mentor and mother didn't see through the binding and body language, everyone else would follow, and her presence at this time wouldn't disrupt much of anything. Everyone went on to catch up with each other. It seemed some of them hadn't seen each other in a few months. She dropped herself on a rock with a sigh of relief, to wait for Son Goku's arrival. Once sitting, she patted her pockets looking for something and idly listening to what she could hear. Gohan asking Piccolo why he hadn't joined the Namekians, the mention of training and the time elapsed, Chaozu asking if he could take a drink as well, to which Trunks said, "Please do so, please help yourself," glancing at the others so they knew they didn't need to ask. Trunks couldn't help but look at the strange team of fighters more or less surrounding her, taking note of their closeness and interactions. She'd heard so many distorted stories from her mother and her mentor. Vegeta, like her, sat on a rock, and stared daggers through her. And like her, he stayed alone. She spared him a few curious glances. Mother did say he looked lonely. Vegeta barked something about his appearance not being something interesting to look at, as clearly Trunks already knew who he was. Trunks promptly looked away, apologized and finished her drink. Whatever she was looking for in her pockets was promptly forgotten about. Piccolo had his back turned to the group and was surveying the horizon and the battlefield instead. He'd find out more about this kid from what the combat than he could learn from talking. Gohan left him after their brief chat and instead approached the strange teenager. The gang waited for Goku patiently, and it became clear Trunks knew who all of them were, but they know nothing of the time traveler. Gohan decided to chat with the teenager and apologize for a previous awkward encounter. Trunks watched the young boy approach. She put on her kindest, most comforting smile. Her heart couldn't bring itself to refuse him. And yet, deep down, she knew she shouldn't fraternize. She died inside as the memory of his future counterpart's death came to her mind. And his shy, embered demeanor. She could only guess why he was approaching, as their first interaction was still on both their minds. Mr. Gohan-san, yes, I'm just a child, mister. You don't need to be so formal towards me, Gohan mumbled, embered by the reverence the teenager showed. He was used to Chan and Kun, but San was a first. It was jarring for the young boy. My mother would have my head if I discarded formalities, Trunks half lied, and disintegrated the empty can in her right hand. Truth is, Bulma didn't raise her with formalities as a focus, but would break her spine if her identity was compromised. That involved fraternizing with the past version of her gang. Gohan finally stated the reason why he'd approached in the first place. I wanted to say I'm sorry for jumping at you like that. Before, I thought you were. The boy was tactful. He spoke in hushed tones and didn't gesture to attract the others' attention, but he was as red as a tomato. He kept his eyes down. The shame from his first encounter with the teenager dawned on him. There's nothing to apologize for, damn it all. Trunks let out a breath and pushed herself off the rock, and took a knee to be at his level, hoping to catch his eyes and attention. Just like his future counterpart used to do. Gohan missed his dad, a lot, enough so that the Super Saiyan aura and ki was enough to convince the boy to throw caution away and leap into the person he believed was his dad. And there's nothing wrong or dishonorable with missing your father, she added in a whisper when he raised his wet eyes to meet hers. He nodded and rubbed his eyes to chase away the emberment of their awkward meeting. All right, Gohan affirmed, he understood the message. You've heard about us, then. That's how you know our names. He needed confirmation, which Trunks gave with a nod. She ended up sitting back against the rock, on the ground and invited Gohan to sit nearby so they could continue their conversation. The sword between her back and the rock didn't bother her. Gohan sat close with his drink as she explained. That is correct. I heard about all of you, actually, Yamcha-san, Krillin-san, Bulma-san, Piccolo-san, Tenshinhan-san, Chaozu-san, she said with a slight head gesture towards every individual as she mentioned them by name, her eyes traveling, and ended with the one closest to her, with a soft, melancholic look in her eyes, and you, Son Gohan-san, the son of Son Goku-san and Chi-Chi-san. She ignored Puer. She knew who the cat shapeshifter was, but disclosing that would be perhaps a little too much insider knowledge. She also didn't mention Vegeta-san, as pronouncing his name might summon him. She'd already addressed him by name. All of them participated in a world martial arts tournament, and Bulma-san's corporation is famous, she said, showing her jacket, and looked around again. It wasn't how she learned their names, but it's partially how Bulma learned many of those names and how she fed on the knowledge to her. Oh, so, you're a martial artist too then? The boy asked with interest. He knew his father's friends were strong, but he didn't know they all participated in the tournament. Gohan only really knew that was how their parents met and how Krillin and Goku became best friends. Goku wasn't the kind to tell stories of his past to his toddler son, after all. In a way, I guess. We don't really do martial arts where I come from. I just fight. Her fingers trembled on her legs, and she grabbed at the fabric. Your hands, are you okay, mister? Discover more. Fiction book recommendations. Story writing prompts. Book club memberships. Writing competition platform. You needn't worry, I am just excited to be in everyone's presence and to meet your father. She breathed in and out to calm down, and showed she was okay with a slight smirk. She had half lied again. Her trembling fingers were also a sign of stress, and she had abandoned the idea of indulging in another stress relief habit, at least for as long as she was surrounded by these people. Wait, you didn't come here to fight my dad, did you? Gohan didn't want his dad to fight again, and risk his life upon arrival. The sudden worry and despair broke his voice and Piccolo's ear twitched. Considering how quickly the teenager disposed of Frieza and King Cold, and how strong Gohan knew his father was, such a fight could turn ugly. No, Trunks laughed nervously. Well, I might request a friendly spar, she corrected with a little haste, truth is her blood still boiled. But no, I came to talk to him, first and foremost. I won't hurt him. She raised her hands to display honesty, but Gohan doubted. He extended his closed hand with his pinky finger out with a serious face, and Trunks observed. That brings memories, she realized, turned to face the child, and matched the gesture, linking their pinkies to seal the promise. They talked for a little while of other miscellaneous superficial subjects, and even drew on the dust with a twig, taking turns. Bulma and Krillin were especially attentive at the scene, even if they didn't hear their hushes. Both agreed they were basically children, even if the older one had seemingly been forced to mature fast. The Capsule Corp heiress mentioned how the sleeves of the teen's jacket were a little too long. The shoulder a little too wide. She even noted the deep pool of loneliness behind those blue eyes. She mentioned some similarities with Vegeta, which were denied by the monk who compared their vibes. Krillin, And unbeknownst to him, Piccolo as well, had kept alert when Gohan approached the fighter, just in case, but they relaxed when both came to the conclusion they seemed to be playing by the end of it. Gohan left the time traveler alone to chat with the others, and Trunks sat back on the rock, after dusting her pants. She pulled her right leg against her and locked her fingers on her tibia, waiting patiently for the time to fly by. Her hands would stop trying to find the item in her pockets, this way. She glanced back at Vegeta, who had observed the previous interaction with disdain. Trunks recalled her mother telling him Vegeta was a proud man with an obsession to catch up to Kakarot, Goku's Saiyan name. The prince's distaste for Gohan was inherited, according to what her mentor told her of their interactions when she'd asked him to know more about her father. Gohan had described the Prince of all Saiyans as a reluctant ally to her when she was a preteen, and now Trunks understood the weight of those words. Vegeta didn't act on his wrath. The brat's power outclassed his and it only increased his rage, but he made sure Trunks felt it, and Trunks was intimidated. So instead she looked at Piccolo. She couldn't be faulted for staring at the green alien man, who was so different from everyone else, so if asked she could hide her reasoning behind curiosity. It wasn't exactly untrue, either way. Gohan had told her of his training with him at age 4, or at least what he remembered, how he sacrificed himself when Vegeta's companion was about to kill him, how they fought together on Namek and Frieza almost killed the both of them. Gohan admired his childhood mentor, and as a child, Trunks admired Gohan the exact same way. Still did, actually. Gohan never talked about how he survived after all of these warriors perished to the cyborgs. With older eyes and a more mature mind, she could finally piece things together. Piccolo had most certainly protected Gohan at the cost of his own life, removing the then 9-year-old from battle some way or another. And Gohan did the same for her, almost 15 years later. And if the cycle of death was any indicator, Trunks could place a reasonable bet that it was Piccolo's death which pushed Gohan to transform for the first time. "I'm here to change that," her inner voice murmured, and she eventually saw his eyes. He'd noticed for a while she was looking at him, but she didn't shy away. The Namekian turned to fully face the teenager, expectant, gaze matching. A million ideas rushed to her mind, about what to ask, what to say, and Trunks was stuck in the decision process. Piccolo eventually made the decision for her. "Kid, want to spar?" Not satisfied with the few answers the teenager gave the gang, Piccolo took it upon himself to ask for a spar. Fists don't lie, after all. "Kid, want to spar?" Yamcha and Krillin choked on their drink. Gohan voiced a worried protest at the idea. Vegeta scoffed and Trunks just blinked in disbelief at the Namekian's words at his offer. Request. Her Gohan never mentioned his mentor's voice, but somehow it sounded exactly like she expected it to sound. Deep, distant, restrained, determined. "He's waiting for an answer." She blinked again and nodded, unlocking her fingers to free her leg and stand. She unclipped her sword and left it on the rock, figuring a spar wouldn't require the use of her weapon. That was as much an agreement as he expected, so Piccolo took off slowly and landed down on the battlefield. Trunks landed nearby, then looked up at the rest who had gathered on the cliff to watch the match. Even Vegeta. Shit. Should have refused. Plan E. A loud thud forced her eyes back to her opponent. He'd removed cape and turban. Weighted clothing, from the sound of it. Nobody mentioned the antennae to her. Bulma and Gohan had mentioned he was tall, but not my height and a half tall. Trunks removed her jacket, loosely folded it and put it down far behind. Better not endanger the precious cargo in combat. She walked back to face the Namekian. Her Gohan had told her how much of a tactician Piccolo truly was. Trunks had wanted to say she wouldn't transform, that it was a friendly spar, but she realized Piccolo knew already. All encompassed in the definition of spar, in a way, and his key was kept low. The green alien's stance was almost at 90 degrees, feet firmly on the ground, weight on both, arms in guard with little openings. A silent understanding was met, and she matched with a low boxing guard of her own. Since he was the one who offered, Piccolo shifted his weight back, and then front to charge, right fist closed and aiming straight to the head. Trunks ducked and struck to return the favor, but her right fist met the other's open hand instead of his stomach. Since she was in his guard, he brought down his elbow to strike her down, and she quickly lifted her left forearm to block the blow. They pushed each other off and guarded again. "Seems you're not just all brute strength," Piccolo commented, and shook his left hand, the hand that had blocked her fist, to let the other know he'd felt that. Trunks made a similar move, turning her left forearm to move the muscles that soaked the Namekian's elbow. That kinda stung, even if she'd broken that arm more than a couple of times before. "You flatter me, Piccolo-san." Trunks somewhat appreciated the praise, but knew it was not deserved, and the tone conveyed she truly dismissed it. Like she told Gohan earlier, she wasn't a martial artist, and her technique wasn't refined. She could only really hold her own, tactically speaking, because she was smaller and faster. It was her turn to attack first, rushing forward, right hand held back, left forearm forward. Piccolo anticipated, planted his feet and crossed his forearms in front of him to soak her incoming fist. He uncrossed before she could follow up with her other hand, breaking the lock and forcing her arm up with the momentum. That opened her flawed guard, and he kneed through it, hard. Trunks was pushed up back flying. She only stopped when she flipped to land on her feet and hands instead of straight up on her back against the cliff. That hit sucked the air out of her. She rose up, tapped her hands to dust off and charged again. They continued trading blows while the others observed. The initial worry Gohan had expressed was put to ease. Bulma complained about not being able to see it all, so Yamcha gave her a sort of translation description of what he saw and felt. They were a solid 30 meters above the action, too, so while they were slow enough to follow with their eyes, it was simply too far for the capsule crop genius to make up the details. Yamcha's arm around her waist reared her as she leaned to try and look. "I didn't hear them agree on terms," Krillin said, squinting his eyes so he could see as well as feel. Gohan confirmed he didn't, either. "Is it first blood?" "Their ki and stances did the talking," Tenshinhan answered the how, but not the what. He knew how Piccolo fought, after their time on King Kai's planet, so he focused on this mysterious savior instead. "Well, he's giving Piccolo a run for his mouth without using that Super Saiyan transformation," Krillin observed. "He's strong too, look at that pushback." Gohan added with a nod, "Piccolo-san is not holding back. The mister is faster though." Naturally the boy paid more attention to his master than to the stranger, but he tried to learn something from the fight. "He's also able to get past Piccolo-san's guard often." Tenshinhan partially agreed with what Gohan observed, but he saw many flaws in the teenager's positioning. He left himself open on many occasions, and Piccolo seized the opportunity when possible. The kid's speed was what saved him from many direct hits, but after a few other exchanges, Tenshinhan realized the hits didn't even register on the boy's demeanor. So the kid moved down when Piccolo tried to aim for his head, and he tried to punch up but Piccolo blocked. Yamcha explained to Bulma and eyed the other fighters observing the fight and asked, "He's quite lean too, don't you think?" "No. His muscles are well defined, he just has a small frame," Chaozu corrected. "He had the best eyesight of them all." He looked at Tenshinhan, who confirmed his observation with a brief glance. Kid went into Piccolo's guard but he kneed him out. Yamcha winced, he knew that was a painful hit. That or puberty hasn't hit yet. And he stands right back up like nothing, damn. Vegeta frowned. The stupid comments from useless weaklings bothered him almost as much as the pathetic fight he was watching. Yes, the teenager had a smaller build, one similar to Frieza's, Gisa's, or even his own. But that brat didn't make use of it at all, and it was infuriating. Fighting as equals with the Namekian, who was taller than Nappa, made no goddamn sense. This kid obviously had also achieved the legendary Super Saiyan, but went easy on the Namekian on purpose, or lacked technique and compensated with raw talent. Either option was unforgivable in the eyes of the Saiyan Prince. PFF'd. A friendly spar, useless bullshit. So he tried to make Piccolo lose his balance by sweeping his legs, but Piccolo avoided that, and he punished the open guard with a kick. Yamcha continued for Bulma's benefit. Well, he's resilient, I think. He doesn't hit as often, but those punches seem painful. Tenshinhan was coming around to have the same observations Vegeta had, but with a different approach. Piccolo hadn't avoided the leg swipe, the kid was just not close enough. This kid, who fought and killed Frieza and his father in an instant, seemingly had no martial arts training per se. He tanked Piccolo's blows like they were nothing when he couldn't block or dodge them. Piccolo had set up the fight to get to know this mysterious kid. Why talk when fists, stances, and eyes didn't lie? This kid could wipe the floor with him, as evidenced by the state of the battlefield in which they were sparring. Trunks eventually realized that had been the goal all along. She remembered how he'd been looking at the result of her fight against Frieza, and now it made sense why he'd asked for a spar. The spar also brought some memories from the ones she had while training with her Gohan, and her paranoid mind started to consider whether he'd recognize some of Gohan's fighting style in her. Piccolo kind of trained me by proxy, actually. He can't know. The distraction slowed the halfling enough for Piccolo's double hammer punch to land on her back. Something faintly cracked, and Trunks' eyes flashed teal a split second. She phased right under him, her right elbow deep into his sternum, her left hand pushing on her right fist to give it extra strength. The Namekian spat blood and Trunks leapt away. Piccolo growled at the pain, and regenerated the shattered bones. Tough little shit, aren't you? He half complimented, half insulted, wiping the blood off his lips. You are tough yourself, Piccolo-san, Trunks retorted with a forced smile, properly standing with no stance. I forfeit. I can't match your skill, she added while vaguely arranging her hair back into a side part. It'd be bad if he cracked the binder again. It's not like she could repair it or change. Thankfully it didn't move, so the crack was only superficial. She took a look at the scratches on her arms. Piccolo's talons were no joke. Accidentally killing Piccolo because he awoke my thirst for blood wasn't part of the what could go wrong list. Piccolo frowned but agreed to call it quits. He didn't get enough intel from this short spar, but it was better to stop there than risk serious injury. He watched the teen walk back to retrieve the jacket, so clearly the crack he felt under his hands was neither the spine or the ribs. The kid also showed no discomfort putting back on the garment. I'll join you shortly, gimme a minute, Trunks casually said to the Namekian, in a much more friendly manner than she'd spoken before. He observed a gesture the teen had done before, patting pants pockets. She pulled out a small box, opened it, took a small white straw-like object from it, putting one end between her lips and burning the other end. Piccolo had no idea what this kid was doing, but he retrieved his weighted clothes and joined the others with a leap. The stress relief nasty habit won. Her mother disapproved, despite indulging in it herself, but there was no stopping her once the teenager growled it dulled the smell of death. Smoking is bad, kids. Toriyama often self-inserts his own nasty habit in his manga and illustrations. I'm using it for a narrative purpose and it's meant to be a bad thing, so please don't romanticize it. Trunks arc. Aftermath. The spar with Piccolo had been a ploy to know more about the teenager, and she fell for it. She forfeited before things got serious. Now to deal with the consequences. Are you alright, Piccolo-san? Gohan had seen the last blow the Namekian took, and felt a brief peak in ki in the opponent. He could visualize how much it must have hurt. Piccolo let out a brief grunt to his pupil's question as he landed and crossed his arms. More sociable fighters expected him to say something, anything about the spar, but he wasn't about to volunteer the information. These people weren't his friends. Bulma pointed down as she recognized gestures she'd seen 1,000 times at home. Is he smoking? He's smoking. You're too young to be doing that, you're a child. She tried to get her own father to quit for ages. She fought Yamcha and demanded, "Fly me down there. I gotta give him an earful." Her boyfriend laughed nervously and refused, pulling her back away from the cliff. "You'll scold him when he comes back up here, okay, B?" While Yamcha was dealing with Bulma listing all of the harmful effects of smoking, the rest looked straight at Piccolo, expecting him to say something, but he didn't. Tenshinhan was the one to actually finally ask something that would give him some insight on the stranger. "Good spar. Decent. That meant anything and everything. That kid has experience fighting, didn't break eye contact and didn't flinch," he added. Piccolo thought what he said was no news to the experienced fighters, but he figured that was information Gohan could use. He'd berated the boy for losing sight of his opponent more than once. "You think he held back?" Krillin ventured a more contentious question. Piccolo didn't care to answer the idiotic question. Of course the teenager held back, he didn't transform. If it had been a real fight, the kid would have made quick work of him. Piccolo hadn't stopped training since their return from Namek, but there were stronger threats out there, and Sun still outclassed him. If anything, that little spar assured him that training was not wasted. Gohan figured that talking to the teenager would give him more information, especially as he was alone down there and they'd already somewhat bonded. He took the teenager's sword and flew down the cliff. Trunks sat with crossed legs in the cliff's shade, looking at the carnage she'd left on the landscape. It was now a little similar to the landscape she saw in her time. She had her hands on her opposing elbows and her cigarette between her lips. Gohan touched ground nearby and a glance from Trunks accepted his presence, especially with the item he was carrying. The smoker used her left hand to hold the cigarette, and blew some smoke upwards. Gohan sat down near her like he had an hour ago, and handed her the sword. With a silent nod of gratitude she put the sword on her lap. She didn't inhale from the cigarette and put it back in between her index and major, on the opposing side from Gohan. She pointed up. "I heard Bulma-san's screams." If smoker Bulma was hard to handle when it came to that topic, non-smoker Bulma who saw a teenager smoking would be an absolute beast. Delaying that confrontation was a survival tactic. "I wanted to finish this before going back. I can't imagine what my mother would say," Gohan wondered, but it couldn't be good. Trunks hid a smile by taking another dose of nicotine. "I'd take a beating from 18 over facing Chi-Chi, anytime." "Say mister, did you hold back against Piccolo-san?" Gohan went straight to the point. "I didn't," Trunks answered honestly. "It would have been disrespectful to Piccolo-san if I had. I just didn't transform." She looked up and blew a circle with the smoke, noticing Piccolo near the cliff. The Namek was keeping an eye on them. The smoke dissipated in the warm summer wind. It wasn't about raw power but about endurance, speed, wits and technique. "Ah, I see. Did he hurt you?" "Not really, it's all superficial. I've had worse. From you, actually." Trunks rolled her left sleeve to show him some of the scratches. Gohan looked, somehow rurred, but he also noticed older and deeper scars on her forearm and the state of her hands, small, thin, but muscular and somewhat hardened. He remembered his own training with Piccolo 2 years prior, but he hadn't retained scars from that period. Once he'd seen, Trunks took another dose of poison and pulled down the sleeve. "He's a good tactician and teacher," she added while blowing smoke upwards again, making brief eye contact with the man in question, still way above them. He might have had his back to the cliff, but his head was turned enough so he'd have an eye on the 2 children below. This spark confirmed what little she knew of the Namekian. Gohan felt a sudden urge of pride. He was so happy to be Piccolo's pupil, and he agreed with the statement with stars in his eyes and an urtive nod. They'd not really trained since their return from Namek, but Gohan hoped his dad and mentor would spend time together. So, he's got better endurance, and you've got better speed. Gohan went back to what sparring tested and took an educated guess. Trunks disagreed with a slight head shake. She'd feel offended if she knew any better. No, I bested him in both those areas. Piccolo-san is smarter and more experienced, his technique was more refined than mine. Trunks figured Piccolo would tell him anyway, so she wasn't worried about explaining it to Gohan. I forfeited because I got distracted and lost my cool, she admitted with a defeated sigh. She took a last drag and blew the smoke before disintegrating the butt. Distracted? Gohan inquired, searching in her eyes for what that meant. Trunks took the sword in her hands, and stood, clipping it back in place, and looked back at Gohan who stood after her. Her Gohan would have known, but this young boy couldn't. I caught on to the reason why he asked me to spar. Trunks had failed to see Piccolo's trap until it was too late. She didn't elaborate, she wasn't certain, her paranoid mind often went overboard with people's intentions, and she figured Gohan would ask his mentor later. Above, Vegeta looked at the horizon, the remains of the battlefield, the burning remains of the spaceship. He pushed the existence of this other Super Saiyan who isn't me out of his mind and mulled over a fact that got under his skin. He spent his whole life under Frieza's orders, getting stronger and planning for a way to revolt and kill the bastard. He'd even entrusted that mission to Kakarot on his deathbed, death ground. That was infuriating enough on its own, but over a year later, he found out Kakarot failed, Frieza was still alive and coming to Earth. And what made it worse is that he knew he couldn't do anything to the tyrant, at least not face to face. And he came with King Cold, to top it all off, so whatever strategy he could think of went out of the window. Vegeta had trained relentlessly on the Capsule Corp grounds ever since their return from Namek to catch up to the 3rd CL, but it wasn't enough. And out of nowhere this god-forsaken brat shows up and deals with the threat like if they were mosquitoes, what the hell? He knew he owed the kid for avenging his entire species, but it was overshadowed by his self-hatred. Livid. Vegeta was livid. He found solace in the fact that the kid's existence proved the legend was not a one-person thing. He'd obtain that power, and then he'd kill them all. Tenshinhan didn't know exactly what to make of this whole situation. How did the kid know about Goku's arrival? He'd implied he knew from Frieza, but he looked like an Earthling. His clothes were, at least. His weapon, perhaps not. His spar with Piccolo was a puzzle piece he couldn't link to anything else. His silent conversation with Chaozu over the teenager's hardened body as well as Piccolo's meant that he has experience fighting made him consider the teenager may have been a sort of child soldier. Tenshinhan also concluded the kid had probably been through hell and back. Bones hardened by microcracks, unbothered by quite a beating, judging from Chaozu's information and his tanking of Piccolo's hits. Trunks hovered back up, closely followed by Gohan. Don't you think you're getting away with smoking at 16, young man? Bulma wasn't going to forget what she saw and approached the teenager with determination. Gohan went to Piccolo's side quickly, not wanting to be caught in the middle of any of that. The Z fighters knew better than to get in Bulma's way, too. Trunks looked at the past version of her mother in disbelief. She reached and grabbed Trunks' ear, much to her shock. Not that Bulma would do that, but that this Bulma would. And she pulled on the ear. You can't go around giving Gohan-kun such a bad example. Now you're going to give me those right now and I might not tell your parents. Bulma was having none of this kid smoking. Trunks only flinched out of habit, but once the shock wore off and her mind confirmed this woman was not in fact her mother, she took Bulma's hand and forced her to let go. She even lost her smile to make a point. The teenager was still a stranger, and a powerful one, so they got alerted by the sudden change of mood. Trunks pulled the hand down slowly but firmly, making sure she wasn't hurting the past version of her mother. Bulma-san, while I understand your concern, she breathed low and narrowed her eyes to stare in the blue ones she inherited. What I do to my own body is none of your business. Color drained from Bulma's face, and she tried to pull away, unsure if the teenager would let her go. The instant a muscle pulled to escape the grip loosened and Trunks' gaze softened. Bulma walked back and promptly shook the fear away, stood tall, crossed her arms and, geez. Instead, walking away back to her boyfriend and giving him an earful for not backing her up. Nothing could traumatize the brief genius after all. Vegeta had been living with her for over a year already, so threats were basically normal communication. Trunks apologized mentally, her eyes following the other woman, and put back on a kinder smile, until the bip of her watch caught her and everyone else's attention. She turned off the alarm. Sun-san should arrive any moment now, she declared with a brighter smile. She went to put back the mini fridge into a capsule and put it away in its case, while the rest looked up, scouting the skies for the ship. It didn't take long for the prediction to be confirmed, as they felt Goku's signature key. Gohan exclaimed it was him, finally he'd see his dad again. Soon the space pod flew into the atmosphere, catching everyone's eye, and it crashed a few miles away into a rocky formation. Yamcha took Bulma against him when they all flew over to meet their missing friend. Everyone landed by the crater, cheering as the pod opened to reveal the returning hero, who looked surprised to see them all here when he heard them. He hoovered over to them with a curious face. How did he know I was gonna land here? Goku asked before landing, and his eyes set on the new face he'd never seen before. Who's this? How did he know I'd arrive here? Goku was curious as he landed close to his friends, sporting the Yardrite outfit he'd been given before his trip. Gohan didn't contain his excitement and jumped to his arms to hug him tight. He kept quiet while the adults talked, and Goku rubbed his hair to let his son he'd missed him as well. This kid told us. Bulma had a head tilt to indicate Trunks who stood near her. Their previous altercation had been forgiven. You don't know him. We thought you'd met in space or something, Sun-kun. Goku looked up and down the teenager, then shook his head no. I mean Frieza discovered my ship and my destination, so he rushed over by the way, who dealt with him and that other guy. Was pretty powerful, I felt it. Piccolo. Vegeta. Vegeta growled in displeasure. Kakarot had just arrived and he was already getting on his nerves by pointing out his weakness. Piccolo denied as well. This kid did it, as a Super Saiyan as well. Goku let out a gasp, and he put down Gohan. A Super Saiyan? Really? Didn't know there were others left. Really? Trunks felt somehow uncomfortable with the sheer excitement the man irradiated. She tensed as Goku approached her to have a closer look, and tried to keep cool when the other looked at her like she was some sort of exciting toy. You're that strong. That's amazing. And you're so young too. Ooh. Really? Vegeta snarled. It's a lie. There's no other Saiyan left but you and me, and this brat doesn't even have black hair. But he did transform. Gohan protested Vegeta's observation once more. Goku let the whole ordeal roll off his back. Who cares about hair? He's a Super Saiyan, that's so cool. And I gotta thank you for that then, Goku said and gave Trunks a firm pat on the shoulder which only made her acknowledge the gratitude with a stiff nod. History's greatest hero just acknowledged her and was way too close. She recognized elements of Gohan's face on the man, as well as his height. The wild Sun mane was almost surreal. Geez Sun-kun, so carefree. Sun-san, if you don't mind, I would like. Trunks eventually said while pointing elsewhere, matching his eyes a moment to show she meant business. Goku put on a serious face, and agreed. Trunks leapt on the other side of the crater created by the landing pod, figuring it was far enough, and Goku followed after saying it'd be a minute when the others protested about not being able to listen. When Goku landed in front of her, he spoke first. Really thanks for that. I sorta should've finished the job on Namek, bad call on my end, he scratched the ground with his foot. It's nothing, they arrived earlier than expected, so I more or less took your place. You would have won easily. Trunks smiled, a mask to hide how problematic Plan A's demise had been in her mind, but no use crying over it now. I didn't catch your name by the way. I haven't disclosed that information, I will explain the reason, but first tell me, Sun-san, are you able to summon the Super Saiyan transformation at will? Yup. Took me a while to get a hang of it, but now I can. Goku grinned with confidence. Goku accepted the request, closed his fists, tensed his muscles, and with a low asu, the power enveloped him, the gold settled on his hair, the green on his eyes, and she could taste his power up close. Trunks looked at this new Goku with mixed emotions, awe, because the man was truly something, nostalgia because she saw Gohan through his father, Gohan who had died over 3 years prior from her point of view, sorrow, as soon a simple thing as a virus would strike this man down. Is this what you expected? Goku asked as he saw the other observing him, and Trunks acquiesced, closing her own fist slowly. It's uncanny how similar. How similar he is to Gohan. Trunks didn't finish the trembling sentence, and instead summoned her own power with a frown at the painful memories the transformation needed. We really do look alike, Goku remarked with a surprised expression. That's neat. Trunks whispered an apology, and the next instant her sword was in front of Goku's face, who didn't even move an inch. Why didn't you move? Trunks looked straight at the older man, baffled. Knew you'd stop, came the matter-of-fact answer. Trunks let her sword down, then pulled it back behind her with a smile. Alright, I won't stop next then, the nerves of steel of this man. Goku charged his energy in his hand, ready to show what he was capable of, excited to test himself against another Super Saiyan. The others saw Goku transforming, then Trunks suddenly attacked their friend. What the hell? Wait. Why's he attacking Goku all of a sudden? Yamcha frowned. It's a spar, Gohan added. He knew that's why Trunks had asked to talk to Goku far off. He wasn't worried, the teen seemed nice, and he pinky promised. Piccolo confirmed his pupil's words and narrowed his eyes on the exchange. He could hear them, but now he was interested in seeing how far ahead Goku truly was. Vegeta now had a proper display of the Super Saiyan power, so he was attentive as well. No wonder he was able to defeat Frieza on Namek. He fully ignored the others' comments about how indeed, the kid wasn't lying, and was a Super Saiyan, which implied being Saiyan. Vegeta still didn't believe it, even despite the evidence, because this kid's eyes had no pride. They all observed the short spar, Trunks trying to slice off Goku, and Goku deviating, blocking or controlling every hit with only one hand. He even stopped the blade between his index and thumb, and held still while Trunks hovered, aura flaming. The teenager jumped back and sheathed her sword. She closed her eyes a moment to force the transformation to fade. Her instinct craved more, but this was neither the time nor the place. You are truly amazing, Sun-san. I know you weren't really trying, Goku retorted while he let his own aura fade away. Thank you for humoring me. I now understand why your absence was such a strain. Vegeta-san is right, there aren't any Saiyans other than yourself, him, and Gohan-san, that I know of. Trunks explained and spared a glance in the group's direction. If I am what I am, it is because he is my father. Goku stared wide-eyed at the revelation. Vegeta's a daddy. Wait. How old? Trunks shook her head softly and put her hands in her pockets. Or rather, he will be. I am not from this era, I arrived here aboard a time machine. From this day onward, I should be born in a little over 2 years. It may seem unbelievable, but that is simply the truth. Goku, lost at the implications, tried to rephrase and see if he got everything. So, you're Vegeta's lil baby, but that baby doesn't exist yet, 'cause you're from the future. Vegeta's lil baby, Trunks' soul left her body at the rephrasing, considering what she witnessed of her father over the last 3 hours and what little information she had obtained from Gohan and Bulma in her own world. Goku had a way with words, and he expected her to confirm whether he understood correctly. She nodded to approve of the information, even if the wording was dicey. Yes, that is correct. It is the reason I cannot disclose my name. My identity, my existence in this dimension is at stake. Please address me as Tora from now on, and please keep my heritage a secret, else I may not exist. I came to warn you, all of you, about the threat that has been spreading in my world, but this is best shared with everyone. Goku agreed to keep the secret, and they came back to the team, who looked at them with a whole lot of questions and waited for the Saiyan duo to give an explanation. Trunks had rehearsed the conversation 1,000 times, memorized every piece of information her mother could cram into her. I would first like to apologize for my secrecy, but it is a necessity, and now that Son Goku-san is here and I've seen him for myself, I can explain. Please address me as Tora with the tiger symbol. It's an honor to make your acquaintance, she added, bowing slightly her head to the group. My presence in this dimension is an unbelievable prowess, she started, crossing her arms. She closed her eyes a moment, remembering what she needed to say, and reopened them with a look of hard determination and no smile. I come from a world that has succumbed to despair, death and blood. Desolate cities, bodies left to rot in the streets, civilians living in fear, armed militias claiming territories for their own survival, anarchy and crime rampant, all due to two unstoppable sadistic monsters. Vegeta-san, Yamcha-san, Krillin-san, Piccolo-san, Tenshinhan-san, Chaozu-san, she stated every name by looking at each individual. In 3 years' time, you die at their hands. And with Piccolo-san's death, the Dragon Balls disappear. Color drained from Yamcha's and Krillin's face first. Gohan realized why the teenager had a strange tone when they'd first spoken, and now understood. Trunks had actually learned about them from history books. No wonder his hands were shaking, he was talking about dead people. And Son Gohan-san, son of Son Goku-san and Chi-Chi-san, met a similar fate later. When she mentioned Gohan's name, her voice betrayed a little more sorrow. That is the future as it was written for Earth. It is my world, and that is what I came here to change with a time machine. The instant she took a moment to breathe, complaints and questions came flying. She lifted a hand to request silence to continue. Son Goku-san here will die prior to these events. In about 2 years' time he shall fall ill to a recently discovered deadly heart virus which will claim his life. As you know, the Dragon Balls do no work to bring back those who died of natural causes. My first mission is to prevent this untimely and dishonorable death. She reached into her jacket's front pocket, took out a small vial, and put it in Goku's hand. The cure was found in my world long after your ping, Son-san, so please take it when the first symptoms appear. I have also sent the genome as well as a dose of this cure to several laboratories. Just in case. Goku looked at the little GL-like vial with a beaming face. He'd get to face these powerful foes, after all. So what are these monsters? Aliens? Krillin asked, hastily. The news of his death, a permanent one, worried him. Trunks looked at him, perhaps a little too harshly, and he gulped and apologized for the interruption. These soulless killers are man-made creations, artificial humans designed by a scientist part of the Red Ribbon Army. The scientist survived Sun San's destruction of the army and sought, or rather is currently seeking revenge. The cyborgs promptly disposed of him once activated. Whenever I found them, I faced them and only survived because they found me entertaining. They're just too strong. They never tire, never sleep. She exclaimed with rage, fists closed tight, then breathed in and out to calm down. May 12, 767, an island about 10 kilometers southwest of South City, at 10 in the morning, is the first documented carnage. A pin could drop in a mile radius and it'd be heard. Goku held the cure firmly in his hand, and looked at the others. Gotta train hard for 3 years then, he said, excited for the challenge. Wait, hear me out. I've got a better idea that will save us the trouble. Bulma clapped her hands. So we gather the Dragon Balls, ask Shenron who this scientist is, have a talk with him, and save ourselves the trouble. Krillin and Yamcha lit up from their gloom expression, agreeing with the idea. Trunks looked at the past version of her mother with kind eyes and felt sorry for the poor young woman. It was a good idea in theory. A good plan A. You do that and I'll kill you, woman. I, Prince Vegeta, will not take the coward's approach to this challenge. I will survive, kill these washing machines, and then I'll kill you, Kakarot. Vegeta, further back, was the reality that shattered that plan. He cut her off holding his fist firm in front of him, determined and unwilling to concede to such tactics. Bulma protested at the stupidity, but Goku stopped her. He, too, wanted to fight, and so did Tenshinhan and Piccolo. Krillin approached Bulma so he could talk to her without Vegeta listening. Trunks heard the monk explain that a common enemy turned them all into friends over the years, and without the threat, Vegeta might be a problem. The Capsule Corp heiress looked back at Trunks with a defeated expression. These guys will be the death of our planet, but fine, I don't have a choice, do I? She lamented. Trunks sympathized, but she believed with Goku there, it would make enough of a difference, and getting Vegeta in their team was something necessary for her existence. Vegeta flew off immediately. He needed to ask the brief patriarch to up the gravity of his training facility and he had the time and date, so there was no reason to stay any longer. Tenshinhan and Chaozu did the same, but they at least spoke their farewells. And what now, Tora-san? Gohan wasn't too happy either about his dad and his friends risking the destruction Trunks had described for a good challenge, but a child had no voice in the matter. Actually, I have another mission to accomplish. Then I intend to go back to my era, to confirm whether my intervention here changed my world or not. To confirm multiverse theory, Bulma asked. Suddenly the physics implications of the existence of this kid distracted her from the grim future that was described to her. Civilians in harm's way be damned, this is far more important. The data will be valuable for my mother's research. I don't really understand the theory of it all. Too abstract. She wanted to avoid more questions from Bulma about the whole time travel situation. Truth was she only knew how the machine worked on a practical sense, to repair it if needed. Why it worked was a whole other skill set out of her reach. Way too many equations. Regardless of what happens, if I survive the time it takes for her to gather the fuel for the time machine, I will come back in 3 years to help you. Trunks' mind had a hard time managing to separate the two Bulmas. One was her mother, this one was not. Talking to one about the other was a disturbing exercise. What is your other mission, Tora? Piccolo asked with a frown. Such an intervention didn't sit well with the Namekian. I have a wish to make to Shenron. Trunks' arc. Setting up camp. But I wanna fight them, please don't do that, Goku protested, almost whining. I don't intend to make a wish that will change your world, Sun-san, Trunks roared. It would certainly be wiser to do as Bulma-san said, but I understand a Saiyan's will to fight. I have hopes for this dimension now that I know you will survive and train. Well, if you don't stop that nasty habit I won't let you borrow the Dragon Radar. Bulma pulled her tongue at the time traveler. She may have forgiven the previous interaction, but she still didn't want the teen to keep smoking. Yamcha got close, worried the teenager might not take well to his girlfriend's second lecture about the subject. Trunks looked back at the feisty woman, smiling. She appreciated how the past version of her mother still cared. She didn't need to know Trunks had a dragon radar already, but she figured she owed her an explanation. Bulma-san, you really needn't worry about it. She remembered how she'd explained it to her own mother. Between screams and confused tears, this one would get a more polite, rational version of the reasons behind the unhealthy life choice. You must understand tobacco dulls my senses and curbs down my thirst for violence. It keeps me from being too reckless when confronted with the smell of death and blood, which is what my world is like on a permanent basis. Stupid Saiyan instincts. Coping mechanism, if you will. She sighed. That's how her mother had described the habit after it had been clear Trunks wouldn't budge. Piccolo-san got me a little too excited earlier, the teenager added with an apologetic look to the Namekian, who just let out a HUMF sound. Goku somewhat understood. Ya don't got a sparring partner to work it out of your system, he concluded. Trunks nodded to show the statement rang true. She had started smoking after Gohan's death, coincidentally. The smell of blood and death only reminded her of that moment, and her first transformation. I get it, and I take it your stupid Saiyan metabolism also keeps you healthy anyway, Bulma grumbled. Trunks nodded again. Okay fine, I'll let you borrow the radar, but the Dragon Balls aren't active right now. Trunks frowned. Of course someone made a wish in the past 12 months. She'd have to wait, or come back with another round trip. How long? I think it was in September, Gohan remembered. Krillin confirmed Gohan's memory. Trunks crossed her arms and mulled things over. Doing a round trip for a month didn't make sense, especially with how much energy the time machine needed and how hard the fuel was to make, but on the other hand leaving now and forfeiting the possibility to make a wish didn't sit well with her. Mother told me it wasn't a priority. You can stay with us at Capsule Corp in the meantime. We got plenty of room and Vegeta will love to spar with you for sure. Bulma decided, and it would also free her from having to repair the robots and the gravity machine all of the time. My mom will love having a well-mannered handsome guy over for a change, she added and elbowed Yamcha softly with a giggle. That was a terrible, terrible idea. Plan F. Plan G. Goku must have seen the obvious and laughed. Better stay with us, you can tell us more about the android's robot things, and we'll get some training alright. I mean, Piccolo, you're training with me and Gohan anyway, right? Piccolo confirmed with a simple yes, and he wanted a rematch with the teenager. They made eye contact and the smirk on both their faces sealed the promise. Plan G. Trunks accepted. She'd already changed the course of time for Goku and his family, so there wasn't much to mess up there. She also shouldn't be anywhere near Capsule Corp grounds, but Bulma looked disappointed. Vegeta kept breaking all of her robots and demanded insane hours of work from her, so Trunks being there would give her a break for a change. Trunks selfishly wanted to know more about Vegeta too, and seeing the past version of her mother so down made her sad. I will visit, Bulma-san, she promised with a soft smile. It's been decided then, Krillin exclaimed. I'll be training with Master Roshi. See you all in 3 years. Bulma used a flying vehicle capsule for her, Yamcha and Puer to get home. Krillin and Piccolo flew off with the Namekian telling them they'd meet in the morning, and finally only Goku, Gohan and Trunks remained. Gonna take us home then? Tora put a hand on my shoulder, K. Goku stated, and took Gohan's hand with his left hand. He lifted his right hand, folding all fingers but his index and major, which he put on his forehead. Trunks did as asked, standing by Goku's right side, and putting her left hand on his shoulder. Like this, she shared a look full of questions with Gohan, who looked just as confused. Instant transmission. Goku giggled, and, pop. Chi-Chi screeched and dropped her basket, seeing something appear out of nowhere on the balcony where she was hanging out the laundry to dry. She quickly recognized Goku's mane and teared up. Goku saw. You're back. Gohan-chan, you're okay. She'd have jumped to the pair if it wasn't for the third, unknown individual who had just let go of her husband's shoulder. This Chi-Chi looked nothing like the Chi-Chi Trunks knew. She turned into a shell of her former self with Goku's ping, and Gohan's death was the final blow. Kai. That's Tora. He's gonna stay with us a little while, okay? We gotta train. There's a new threat comin'. It's a pleasure meeting you, Chi-Chi-san. Trunks bowed her head. Oh, you're so polite. Pleasure's mine, Tora-kun. Chi-Chi returned the greeting, but she quickly turned back to the important issue. Goku-sa, what do you mean stayin' with us? You've been gone for almost 2 years and you. What you mean? New threat. Again. Gohan-chan's gotta study and you gotta find work. 2 years. I have my own house. Trunks tried to get a word into the woman about her intrusion, but there was no use, and Gohan took her hand to draw her away from the bickering couple. Or rather, the one-sided fight in favor of the strongest woman on the planet. I didn't know Sun-san possessed such an ability, Trunks softly grumbled. She didn't need to intervene with Frieza. After all, the man could teleport somehow. No use crying over spilled milk now, she protected innocence by intervening. Her mother couldn't have known, after all, and she did say the battle she had witnessed was brutal. Me neither, Gohan sighed. He decided to train in space instead of coming back home, so I guess. He'd missed his dad so much, but his dad chose to train over coming back. It was conflicting for the young boy. They leapt off the balcony to take a good look at the scenery. Mount Paozu, Trunks breathed out. You know from your time, Tora-san. The teen nodded but gave no context. She'd visited her Gohan's grave often, on these same grounds. This wasn't something the 6-year-old needed to hear. I'll set up camp further down there, she indicated. Oh no, you'll not, young man. Chi-Chi said, leaning on the rail of the balcony, gesturing widely. You're stayin' at home and eatin' my home-cooked meals and help Gohan-chan with homework and choppin' wood. Plan G was a terrible idea. It took a lot of persuasion, tact, and convincing for Chi-Chi to accept their guest to have her own home on their property. The compromise reached was that Trunks could sleep and shower on her own, but would share meals and housework with the Sun family. Chi-Chi took hospitality seriously and wouldn't have it any other way, even if she'd initially complained. The Sun wife still grilled her guest during dinner, about her age 16, almost 17, her education and job prospects, homeschooled, mechanical engineering, her family. My father died when I was a baby, but my mother is a jack-of-all-trades engineer, her girlfriend, choking on rice sounds, the sword on her back, a gift. The three had unknowingly agreed to keep Chi-Chi in the dark about the future, Gohan and Goku's deaths and the whole time-traveling situation. Gohan admired how truthful the teen seemed when answering his mother's questions, all while keeping information to a strict minimum. He wanted to learn more. After dinner, Trunks helped wash the dishes and excused herself, pretending she needed to sleep. She didn't, but she needed to take the binder off and repair the split. She turned on the radio on the news stations and got to work. In the capsules her mother had given her, alongside the tools necessary to repair her time machine if needed, as well as a computer and a whole lot of documentation, she found a few changes of clothes. Trunks didn't really have many outfits, so Bulma preparing it for her meant she'd considered the possibility of her kid not coming back. Just in case, mother. Time travel wasn't exactly a tested science, after all. Hopefully, she'd come back only minutes after she'd left. The radio news were jarringly mundane. No evacuation orders, no missing people adverts, no militia messages. She only slept a couple of hours that night, her constant state of alertness not allowing her to have a proper full rest. She wandered out at night, in pajamas, with her sword secured on her back, and found herself actually patrolling instead of enjoying the scenery and wilderness. Habits die hard. Before dawn, she was back in her temporary home. She washed and changed. Binder, capsule corp gray tee, loose black pants, the same boots, hair with a middle part. She spent half an hour foraging for berries, and by the time she came back to the Sun household, breakfast was being served on the outside table, at the break of dawn. Tora-kun, early bird and you. Sit down, it's almost ready. Chi-Chi commented when she saw the teenager out of the woods and returned to the kitchen to continue cooking. Gohan in a white tank top and green pants and Goku in his signature orange GI were more or less helping setting the table and waiting impatiently for the food. Trunks put the basket of berries wherever she could and sat. There was no use offering Chi-Chi any help as she'd learnt the hard way the night prior. Uncomfortable with letting the Sun wife do everything, Trunks' offer was forced out of the door by Chi-Chi's deadly weapon, her frying pan. Goku and Gohan dug in as soon as they were served, but Trunks waited for Chi-Chi, thanked her for the food and ate with small talk about the woods, the beauty of the landscape and so on. She'd seen Gohan, her version at least, eat with such voracity before, but not these quantities. She had a Saiyan appetite, but these two were black holes for anything edible. Chi-Chi shooed her away when she offered to help with the dishes. Piccolo was there already and they were already warming up for the morning. Shoo, shoo. The first half of the morning was light practice on the front lawn of the Sun property. Trunks faced Goku, Piccolo training Gohan. I remember doing that with Gohan-san. She and Goku spared lightly, getting used to one another. He corrected her guard a few times and eventually came to the same conclusion as Tenshinhan and Vegeta did when they observed her fight with Piccolo. But unlike the two older experienced fighters, Goku worded it out loud. "Ya didn't do martial arts, did ya?" Goku eventually plain up asked, stopping her fist with an open hand, and returning the favor. Not really. Training was sparse, at best, she blocked with her forearm. And mostly focused on building endurance and stamina. Got to be tough to survive their beatings. I mean, you punch well, good fist there, elbow angles fine, and you got to hold against Piccolo. Gohan had told him about the sparring he'd witnessed the day before. Positions and guards so bad though, Tora. Why you don't use our size difference? Goku remembered how he lost to the mysterious Jackie Chun so many years ago. His question was out of genuine interest rather than berating. The cyborgs don't do martial arts. She deflected Goku's next punch with an open hand on his wrist and followed swiftly to elbow him in the ribs. Goku tanked it, then they got out of each other's guards. Actually, they are both about my height, so I don't really have experience with taller or smaller fighters. She stood straight so Goku could judge her height more easily. 165. And they use a whole lot more ki, since they never run out of energy. I see. Let's take 5, Goku decided, and Trunks agreed with the idea, going to fetch drinks. She walked closer to the house to grab the 4 bottles of water left there by Chi-Chi, and carried them back to the older man who sat to watch his son and former rival training. She sat as well, handed him a bottle, set 2 aside, and opened the last one for herself. Sun-san, what do you feel when you transform? Trunks had to know if her issue was hers alone. Discover more. Fan merchandise, books, TV show guides, writing software, fan art commissions, mobile app development, fan fiction books, author tools, books and literature, writing competition platform. Oh geez, like I wanna beat something up real bad. Well, that was candid. He drank a good amount of water and continued. Only been able to do it at will for like, the past 4 months or so. I dunno, it's like something takes over and won't be happy until something or someone gets reduced to a pulp. Kinda scary. You too. Unyielding thirst for blood and suffering, yes. I only ever get it out of my system when I'm the one being reduced into a pulp, which only gets more frustrating as you can imagine. And since my fighting options are limited, Sun-san, it took all of my willpower to execute Frieza and his father instead of dragging it just to satisfy the sadistic thirst. If I knew you could teleport. Yeah. Sorry about that. I'm real thankful. I missed a great fight, but your call was smarter. I just get super excited for a good fight, ya get me? Isn't always what's best for the planet though. Trunks didn't get it. She didn't like fighting, but perhaps it was a half-breed thing. Gohan didn't like to fight either. Clearly, having a good fight was the main goal for Goku, and saving the world was just a fortunate side effect of that mentality. I don't really get it, but it is certainly because our worlds are so different. She looked ahead to see Gohan and Piccolo. The Namekian didn't hold back and didn't let the boy take a breather, but Trunks didn't look away from the display of brutality. It just brought back memories. With a father and without rampaging monsters, I could see myself enjoying the ride, she admitted. When Gohan and Piccolo took a break, she got their attention and tossed them their bottles. Gohan was more vocal in his thanks, Piccolo barely sparing a glance in lieu of gratitude. Gotcha. We'll change that future for sure and get you a good daddy. Goku emptied his bottle and grinned wide. Wanna fight and get that itch scratched? I've got senzu beans so we can go all out. Stupid Saiyan jeans, she laughed quietly and agreed, finishing her own water. I definitely won't hold back this time. Goku waved over at the two others to let them know they were moving locations, and he figured Piccolo and Gohan could learn from watching the fight. They flew off to a desolate colder area where they could fight without worrying about their surroundings, and Goku gave the senzu pouch to his son for safekeeping. Years of brutal beatdowns had given Trunks more resolve and more endurance, as well as surprisingly more experience with the transformation, especially when she didn't need to keep her instincts in check. Goku on the other hand had a much keener fighting awareness and technique, more experience as a fighter in general. His hits were more precise, his energy management was more effective, while hers were more powerful. In the end, Goku outclassed her. It took them a few broken ribs and busted lips on her part to finally call it quits, and she conceded defeat, exhausted. They sat with Piccolo and Gohan to debrief once healed with the senzu beans the child gave them hastily. Gohan was in awe, and the threat to come is so much stronger than this. You cheat, you wearing some armor, Goku pouted, wiping the blood off his nose, and pointed an accusatory finger at the torn tee of his opponent. You're wearing weighted clothes, she retorted, trying to deflect the subject and not correct the fact that her binder isn't in fact armor. Even if it was made from the same material as the armor Vegeta wore. At least they didn't see it for what it was, so it was fine. Not anymore, he corrected, cheeky. His clothes were all ripped off after all. Trunks had fought, not sparred. Tora, how much stronger than Son are they? Piccolo asked. Might as well use the intel the teenager could give them now the Super Saiyans properly tested each other, all out. Asking me to do arithmetic after this, how cruel, Piccolo-san. Trunks wiped off the sweat of her forehead and gave it a moment. The comparison was apples to oranges, as the twins more often than not fought in sync, and had infinite energy, and couldn't be sensed. So she compared what she could. They're about as fast as me, and I think I'm faster than you are, Sun-san. Goku agreed with her estimate. Sun-san's punches hurt less than 18's. She added for Piccolo. And 17 is the strongest of the pair. About twice as strong, in raw strength. At least according to her memory of the punches the cyborgs had given her, compared to the ones she'd just received from Goku. Also, I broke your nose, my apologies. Goku waved it off, it was no big deal. They took that to the face. Not a dent, didn't even blink, she sighed at the humiliating memory of her last fight with the twins. Most importantly, unlike us, they don't lose energy, and they fight together. She pulled her leg closer and rested her arm on the knee. And she had no way of knowing if the cyborgs had actually gone all out on her or Gohan. She paled at the possibility of them holding back. Piccolo wasn't pleased, but at least the kid was being as throughout as possible. He got an idea from the last bit of information, however, and stood. Gohan, you're going to fight Son and me, together. Goku caught on with the plan, agreeing it was a wonderful idea, and he stood. Alright, good old round 2. Tora, see ya later. Tell Kai we'll be back for dinner K. Trunks agreed, gave a sympathetic look to Gohan who didn't look that hot with the idea. She left him encouraging parting words for the early afternoon. "You're strong, Gohan-san, trust yourself and don't give up." During her stay, Trunks soon found that Goku was absolutely shameless, bathing outside with his son and just, not a care in the world to show his body to everyone. It took all of her mental discipline to contain herself the first time it happened and keep neutral. And refusing the invitation to share the warm tub was a feat of mental strength. She got used to the weird routine for a week or so, catching a noon nap every now and then to compensate for her little sleep at night. Repairing her binders, doing laundry, putting in some sword exercises, and exploring further the rest of the world before dawn. Seeing the past version of her desolate world, with cities full of light and life, gave her confidence that this world would remain. The routine was pleasant. Light work in the morning, mutual observation, pushing Gohan past his limits, a few martial arts corrections, and a couple of all-out spars with Goku's Super Saiyan transformation. Piccolo got his rematch, and won on technique superiority. She skipped a day to do groceries with Chi-Chi in town and help her with house chores. She even helped Gohan with math school work, ignoring the uncanny situation she'd been at his age, when Gohan tutored her. Gohan's bedroom had more or less stayed identical as well. Not having to be alert all of the time eventually helped rest and gain better control of her instincts, and she observed that ever since she set up with the Sun family, she hadn't needed to smoke. After a solid week and a half, she warned the Sun family the next day she'd go to Bulma's place. She had even noticed Piccolo was sometimes around at night, and was all too keen on keeping an eye on her nightly activities. She decided to actually approach him on the last night, and have a chat, while he was hovering over the forest where she practiced her swordsmanship in pajamas at this hour. "Piccolo-san." The Namekian didn't say a word. He knew the teenager had noticed him a while ago and had accepted his surveillance. "Don't trust me much near Gohan-san, am I wrong?" Ear twitch. "Piccolo-san." She flew in front of him, hands on her opposing elbows and reading through him, or rather, through what she knew of him. He grumbled something but said nothing, and just looked at the teen who looked somewhat different. Perhaps it was the striped white and blue night ensemble, barefoot, or the posture. Feelings do not come naturally to the likes of us, it seems. Trunks lamented in a whisper with a slight head shake. Piccolo-san, he knew. He loved you too. Her use of past tense was strange for the Namekian. He questioned with his eyes and frown, and Trunks decided to open up, with a meek smile, a mask to hide the hurt and uncanny. "Piccolo-san, you died when I was barely a baby, but Gohan-san, more or less raised me, trained me like you trained him like you are training him. What little he was able to teach me before his death came from the love you had for him. He knows. He loves you too." The teenager was sure of it. She saw in Gohan the same behavior she herself had with her Gohan. Piccolo found words that matched his feelings on the matter. The explanation was uncanny but he accepted it at face value. "He's a good kid." Trunks let her smile grow more genuine, it reached her eyes. "He is." By dawn, Trunks in her capsule house had disappeared from the Sun estate. It could have been just all a vivid dream if it wasn't for the basket of wild strawberries left on the outside table. Gohan snacked on the parting gift, disappointed he hadn't gotten to know more about the mysterious teenager. Chi-Chi lamented the absence of conversation at breakfast and the help with dinner dishes, but Goku and Piccolo acted as if the teen had never been there to begin with. It peeved the young boy but he figured he'd have other chances before the Dragon Balls became active. The flight took the better part of the morning. Trunks first flew high, figuring she'd go faster that way, but she quickly realized that this world, unlike hers, had planes. And an army, recovering from Nappa's all 2 years prior. So she flew lower, avoiding any hint of sentient life if possible. Finding West City wasn't a challenge, but recognizing this West City was a whole different beast. Thankfully, the general layout hadn't changed despite the carnage, and the occasional noticeable landmark guided her eyes to find the past version of her home neighborhood. She landed swiftly atop a building and observed the traffic below, the life, the carelessness. Her alertness had to be dulled. With so many people, it was becoming overwhelming. She never went that far from Mount Paozu during her night patrols. The previous week, Mount Paozu was remote and uninhabited, overall, and West City was the exact opposite. Thankx wondered if she'd ever felt that many people before. This is going to be so much harder. She found the signature dome of the Capsule Corp complex and marveled seeing it undamaged, beaming even, with the greenery surrounding it, and not the rubble and scrap metal she was used to. And that round spaceship on the lawn. She slid down between buildings to touch ground and took a walk around. She needed an hour getting used to being surrounded by more people than her whole world had left. Let alone traffic laws. She apologized to the police officer who stopped her when she tried to cross at red, mumbling about not being from around here. The police officer remembered a young boy who had landed on a sort of cloud, with a pole on his back who was looking for the briefs, air, when seeing this teenager with a sword on her back and the same look of wonder in her eyes, and let her go with a little scolding. Thankx was reminded she'd skipped breakfast when the sweet smell of a bakery got her attention. Still had that pre-charged card, so she went in to get some sweet, delicious nutritious baked goods. And a strawberry cake for the past version of her mother. Her favorite. She checked her watch. 11 o'clock. Capsule Corp. State your business please. The robotic voice told her over the intercom. My name is Tora. I came to see Bulma-sama. She stood in front of the camera with a smile, waving at it with her free hand. Please wait a moment, the voice said. While waiting, Thankx focused on her senses for a brief instant. Vegeta was there, in that spaceship she'd seen from above. The gravity room. There were many other lifeforms. Her mother had told her how her grandparents kept a whole menagerie of animals. This was probably it. The door opened to an enthusiastic blonde young-looking woman wearing an apron, shorts and a tube top. That chignon was tight. Thankx knew who she was, but she didn't know the older woman at all. Welcome there, young lady. Please come in. Bulma-chan will be here shortly. You came for girl time. How adorable. Thankx froze. No, she hadn't forgotten anything, did she? Side part. Day 1 outfit. Sword on her back, practiced gait. She followed. Now if a meteor could strike me right now. Mrs. Brief. How? Oh please, call me Panchi. Mrs. Brief was my mother-in-law. Her grandmother giggled and led her through the reception area. She'd seen pictures of her, but her mother never elaborated on her family history. They walked past a couple of doors and into the habitation proper. Panchi-san. She was red in the face, and lifted the white cardboard box she held by the string securing the package together. I brought cake. What a nice gesture. Such a polite young lady, aren't you? Thank you, Tora-chan. She took it. I'll refrigerate it. You are staying for lunch, aren't you? This will be perfect for dessert. Do you want aid, coffee, beer or something else, dear? Beer was tempting actually. Was this a test? Nothing. I wish not to be a bother. Keep it cool, don't let it get to you. Ah, are you sure? It's no trouble. Alright then, I'll get lunch finished. That dashing young man is probably starving by now. The living room past the reception area, in the living quarters of the complex, was so different from her own. The dining room adjacent, though, hadn't changed much, at least the table was the exact same she knew. Most kitchen appliances had been recycled by her world's mother. Panchi put the cake in the large fridge and resumed cooking with a little song for herself. Mom. Bulma ran down the stairs to see how her mother had intercepted her guest, and she saw how embered and baffled the teenager was by the whole exchange. Those red overalls looked far too familiar on the blue-haired engineer, too, and Thankx was speechless from the double shock. Geez, Mom. Don't ember my friends like that. Panchi giggled from the neighboring kitchen. Sorry about my mom, she's a bit out there sometimes. Glad you didn't forget your promise to visit, too. Mind coming with me to the lab? Mr. Prince of all of two Saiyans broke some equipment and I need to repair it else. She closed a fist in front of them and made her best impression of a Vegeta threat. She seemed annoyed by Vegeta's antics, but not intimidated. Trunks agreed and followed her upstairs to the first floor. Her version of the first floor's main lab was destroyed a while back. Her mother lamented the loss of her precious equipment and research. Well, Prince of all 3.5, actually, Bulma corrected the amount of Saiyans and used her card to open the door to one of the workshops of the lab, and resumed working on some destroyed robots. Trunks stood by the older woman, observing how she tried to open up the beaten-up mechanical creations to fix the motherboards. Unable to do it by hand alone, Bulma fumed, and gestured towards the toolbox. We can chat while I work. Can you pee me the 12 inches wrench she wanted appeared in her hand. Trunks knew her modus operandi better than anyone else. Yes, that one. Thanks. He somehow manages to squish them so much getting to the motherboard is a pain. The wrench was used to pry open the poor bot, and get the desired electronics out of the carc. She put the aforementioned piece under a magnifying GL to start working on it. The halfling decided that her strength might be put to good use, and she used her fingers to force open the remaining robots while Bulma worked on testing and soldering back the components. Trunks, almost on autopilot, started pinging the tools over and clearing the workspace as the genius worked, like she'd do at home. Only the permed curls and the absence of tobacco helped Trunks remember that this was not, in fact, her mother. Everything else, such as the rants, the curses, the rage groans, the threats and insults at the incooperative piece of tech, the prideful victory speeches, felt identical to her mother. Only this past version was more energetic, and arguably less stressed. Trunks was pretty sure the coffee brewer she spotted near the buzzing computers was also the exact same model the one her mother had. It was half full. Vegeta-san is training hard. Trunks noted the obvious after a while. Your little fight with Sun Kun got him all riled up. Actually, he's even more unbearable than usual. Gotta admire the tenacity. I don't think he even slept. You barely have rested too, mother. Vegeta-san seems goal-oriented, understatement of the year. Here, Trunks ped the tin for the soldering iron to the genius at work as the previous roll had run out. Thanks, you're a pretty good eye-stant. No way would I let any of those morons approach a workstation, but you know your way around a lab. Brawn and brains aren't you? Bulma had noticed how the teenager cleared the table and replaced supplies as they ran out, anticipating her needs, and somehow found stuff in her organized chaos. Yamcha had nowhere near enough wits to follow her workflow and be useful, even if he tinkered a little himself. Goku was an absolute tech illiterate, and Vegeta didn't seem to have enough patience for such delicate work, or patience for anything, really. Her dad was busy programming the new improved gravity system and she was stuck working alone. She accomplished almost a day's work in under an hour with the help of this strange teen. You flatter me, Bulma-san. She didn't really want to continue that conversation. Perhaps her helpfulness was dangerous, instead placing a cup of freshly poured coffee on Bulma's field of vision, who drank it with a primal need she didn't know she had. Calling it quits until after lunch. Bulma decided with a sigh, the caffeine releasing much-needed dopamine in her sore body. I'm exhausted. Tora-kun, you gotta stay and keep that ungrateful son of a bitch busy while I catch some rest and upgrade these. If you wish so, I can incapacitate him for a few weeks, Trunks joked with a little mischievous smile. Don't tempt me with peace and quiet, Bulma laughed, patting the teenager's arm. Deep down the woman enjoyed the challenge of keeping up with Vegeta's demands. The intercom buzzed. Lunch is almost ready, darlings. Panchi's voice echoed in the room. Great. I'll get changed. You know your way back to the dining room. Trunks confirmed she knew her way back, but stayed a moment. She was used to her mother getting out of her overalls in the lab. But this wasn't her mother, and she was expecting the teenager to leave. Shit. Trunks got red, mumbled something about zoning out and promptly disappeared, leaving Bulma wondering if perhaps he had a crush on her. Trunks met Dr. Brief at the table, apologizing for the intrusion in their family. He was welcoming and unbothered. She knew from the pictures the man smoked, but not that he smoked constantly. She was ignored a seat by the housewife, and took it, letting the sword rest against her right leg. Tora-kun was it. Are you Bulma's new boyfriend? Dr. Brief wondered, easygoing and simply curious. Oh, don't be silly, darling. His wife corrected, serving aid. Bulma-chan only has eyes for Vegeta-kun, can't you see? Trunks just drank to keep quiet. Could use a smoke, actually. She made eye contact with the little black creature on her grandfather's shoulder. The little cat stared back wide-eyed. Holding a staring contest with a cat was a good way to take her mind off the two adults talking about the dating history of her mother. She didn't register Panchi wondering where that other handsome young man had gone, neither did she notice her mother arrive until she pulled the chair at her left and sat down. The cat won their little duel and looked smug. Curry was served, there was one extra large plate. Vegeta hadn't come out of the GR. Trunks didn't ask, but her staring at it had Bulma answer the unspoken question. The sociopath bastard doesn't eat with weaklings, she scoffed with disdain, he'll come out when we're done. Trunks accepted the answer, and when Panchi sat down, it was go time. They ate with a little small talk, and Trunks was grateful the Briefs didn't grill her like Chi-Chi had. They just accepted everything that came their way, including Vegeta, everything rolled off their back. Didn't ask where she was from. The teenager minded her manners but took seconds when pushed by Panchi. Even if she hadn't been hungry since she ate the senzu bean after her last spar with Goku, he'd explained senzu beans also kept people full for 10 days, repressing the need to eat, but eating was also part of training. Oh right, Bulma-chan. Tora-chan brought us this strawberry cake for dessert. Really? If you weren't so young I'd believe you were trying to seduce me. Bulma exclaimed and gently elbowed her neighbor with a playful wink. Trunks got scarlet red at the idea and begged for death. A big meteor would be nice. The housewife served them each a generous slice. Maybe shouldn't have picked her favorite. Coffee was last, and offered on the compound's balcony. Trunks really wanted to do the coffee-cigarette combo like her grandfather, but decided against it, so she instead offered to do the dishes, but Panchi stopped her. No, silly, we have a dishwasher. You go and prepare your sleepover and gossip about boys. Housewives were certainly the most powerful creatures on the planet. Trunks took her sword in hand and left the table with Bulma. The older couple drank their coffee on the balcony. Mom, Tora's staying with us a little while. Bulma stated, knowing it was no problem, especially after housing a few dozen Namekians a few months prior. I'll show you your room. I have my own house. Cammy, please not again. No, you don't fight me on this, young man. We have plenty of room. Bulma was determined, and Trunks couldn't bring herself to fight her. She agreed with a defeated sigh and followed her through the second floor. The layout was eerie in its familiarity, but also in its differences. Her second floor was barely used, as it was unstable and some parts lacked a ceiling, but she'd spent hours in there. Bulma walked in those halls in a much more confident way her future self did, and it was hard for Trunks to keep everything separate. Bulma chose one of the guest bedrooms, one close to her own room which she indicated was the last one down the hall, and opened it up for Trunks to see. It had everything furnished as a mini apartment, up to and including private showers, thank Cammy, a desk, some books, a big fluffy bed. Is this to your taste? Trunks just nodded yes, and put the sword on the bed as to claim it. Make yourself at home. Vegeta's room is that one, indicating the door opposite of her new living quarters. Heavens please no, but he kinda sleeps in the gravity room. When he sleeps. Saved. Bulma-san, is it okay for me to access the network? Trunks had another reason to accept the offer to stay at the compound. Meeting Vegeta and her grandparents were good perks, but this was more important on a pragmatic level. Yes, of course. I'll get you a computer. Trunks shook her head to refuse and pulled her capsule case, indicating she had everything she needed. Alright then, the cable is right behind the desk. If you need any help, I'm either at the lab or in my room, Bulma added, and gave the teenager a card to access everything in the compound. I'll let you get settled on your own, gotta take a well-deserved nap. Help yourself to the fridge, okay? Trunks nodded to show she'd understood. Rest well, Bulma-san, she wished, and once alone behind closed doors, she emptied her pockets, capsule case, cigarettes, wallet, now clean, handkerchief, and removed her jacket. She sat at the desk a moment, with the capsule case open, and considered her options. Accessing the network right there and then was feasible, but she decided against it. Keeping only the access card and hiding the capsule case between two books on a shelf, she left her newly acquired base of operations, put back on her boots, and went back to the first floor to meet Vegeta, who was just done inhaling the curry left for him. He glared daggers at the time traveler, who held firm and matched his gaze. Vegeta looked right out of intense workout, sweaty, shirtless, a towel thrown on his shoulders. And pissed. Why are you here? He'd probably sensed her presence earlier, so he wasn't surprised to see her. Trunks was slow to answer. She needed to be walking on eggshells with the man, if she wanted to exist in this timeline. Her mother had told her he was a lonely, selfish and proud man whose only desire was to beat Goku. Answer me, brat. To fight you, stupid Saiyan genes. I came here to fight you. God damn it, stupid Saiyan genes. Trunks couldn't believe this was the most sensible reason she could give for her presence on the Capsule Corp compound. The smile worn as a mask, a gentle confident threat, challenged the prince, and he narrowed his eyes on her. Now it was his turn to be slow to answer. Time to return the favor. You're afraid. Vegeta crashed the bottle of water he was holding, rage irradiating from the insinuation. Victory. He turned heels and walked back to the GR, and Trunks followed. The time traveler closed the door of the GR behind her. She took a second to see the state of the training room. Dents everywhere, recent and not so recent blood on some tiles, a few discarded bots by the control panel, a few towels, a few bottles of water. Clearly Vegeta more or less lived there. She wondered why he hadn't turned on the gravity of the room, but the state of the control panel and the absence of any lights around it gave her an answer broken. At least the room could still withstand immense power, from what her mother had told her about the invention she had needed to dismantle and repurpose before the initial cyborg strike on West City. She moved forward and faced Vegeta. Uncanny how they crossed their arms exactly the opposite. Him always keeping his fingers on his ribs, hidden under his arms, her always putting her fingers on her opposite elbows. She uncrossed first and took the same low boxing guard like she did with the spar with Piccolo. Transform. He ordered. She waited a moment. She should really ask why, but she knew better. Vegeta was proud and combative. Fighting him with anything less than everything she got would infuriate him even more, and he wanted to test himself. Her eyes flashed teal, and she summoned the power that came to her slowly. The person who would be her father observed with a lot of attention. He felt the change of ki, he saw the smile disappear, the emotions change, the fists close more tightly, the muscle build up a little tougher and tenser. Up close, without her jacket, he could observe. He uncrossed his arms and took his own stance. Trunks challenged with a slight nod. Vegeta built up power as much as he could, and charged, fired, punched, kicked, tried every trick in his book, but the teenager didn't move an inch. She deflected, held a finger to his fist, a forearm to his kick, an ankle to his swipe, an open hand to a Gaelic gun. Every time he got physically close, she pushed him off with his own force, and he charged again. His punch to the head landed behind her, and the Super Saiyan grabbed his arm to throw him upwards with his own momentum. He flipped on the wall where he landed, propelled himself back at his target, and she just met his foot with her open hand, pushing him off again. Vegeta didn't give up, and he rode his frustration and anger to give it all, cursing all sorts of profanities. And he grew even more furious because she never retaliated beyond using his own strength against him. Trunks was somehow enjoying this. Her vastly superior speed and power allowed her to fully observe her would-be father's fighting style, his technique, his efforts. His guard was always flawless, his use of the terrain was fascinating, and he aimed his hits to kill. He had fallen into the same trap Piccolo had laid out for her. This is how she got to know Vegeta. And the despair, the anger, the loathing, the jealousy, she could taste it and it satisfied her. I'm barely warmed up, Vegeta-san, she had to twist the knife. Encouragement didn't mean anything to him, she had understood already. He was livid. Good. You insufferable piece of shit, I will feast on your entrails. His power rose. At least he's always had the thirst for blood. I guess the Super Saiyan transformation will not fundamentally change him like it affected Sun-san, Gohan-san or myself. Whether that's good news or bad news. Big talk when you've not even scratched my skin, counterclockwise now. At every try, he roared and tapped into deeper energy reserves, and every time he was met with the unyielding resistance. Trunks admired the dedication. They'd been at it for hours, and he hadn't stopped to even catch a breath. Maintaining the form was becoming strenuous, even if she didn't use a lot of energy, it was becoming hard to remain focused for so long. When she grabbed his wrist after another attack attempt, instead of pushing him off, she forced him to turn and locked his arm behind his back. She put the other arm around his neck at the same time, and she held firm. The thirst clawed at her mind, demanding blood, but she ignored it and ignored him trying to fight off, until he went still. She still held him like that, firm and uncomfortable, but not painfully. At least not painful anymore now the articulation had cracked under the pressure. He'd never admit giving up, but his energy was almost non-existent, he was exhausted, he should have ped out a long time ago. Still, she held, her chin almost resting on his shoulder. Frieza, she spoke low, he tensed, I killed him in your name. Vegeta had so many questions, he tried to turn his head but couldn't, he tried to word them, but his vision started to fade. Trunks let the grip go, but she still held his wrist to let him down slowly. She abandoned the Super Saiyan form seeing her father barely holding on his hands and knees, she waited for him to manage back into some sort of conscious state. He forced himself against the machines and sat, drenched, panting. She crouched in front of him, but he didn't look at her. He coughed and finally asked. Why? Because I know what he did to you, to us. He punched down, the tiles barely registered. He'd truly not slept for over a week. I will not die to your stupid washing machines. She smiled. The determination gave her hope. You're from the future. He groaned. She made an affirmative sound. He looked back at her, finally, the sweet release of sleep claiming him after days of intense self-loathing induced training. Do I get there? Achieve the legend? He ped out. She wasn't sure if he heard her affirmative nor if he would remember, but it didn't matter. She briefly checked his vitals. He was out of commission for good, exhaustion finally claimed him. She took his arms, then pulled herself up and then him, and carried him on her back to the house. He's lighter than Gohan. The grim memory clouded her mind. Bulma quickly opened the door to the house for her, in her pajamas, eyes full of worry and anger. It was well past dinner time. Hell, it was even night already. What the? Tora. She even scolded. He did it to himself, she winced. I know, I saw. Why didn't you stop him like 3 hours ago? What do you mean, saw? Oh, right, monitored, cameras. It's just exhaustion. Mind opening me to his room? She readjusted him on her back and followed the blue-haired woman upstairs. With her help she laid Vegeta on his bed, on his side. Bulma used a wet towel to clean his face, and she too checked his vitals. While Bulma tended to the full-blooded Saiyan, Trunks grabbed a towel to wipe her own face and she put it on her shoulders. She was drenched in sweat, mostly his, but also hers. They shut down the light, closed the door and left him to rest. Bulma-san, Trunks asked, and they went into the room she'd given her. With a serious face she indicated the door, and Bulma closed it, slightly uncomfortable with the idea of being alone behind closed doors with this determined stranger who tried to seduce her with strawberries. The teenager just sat on the side of her bed, pushing the sword behind her, and invited Bulma to sit near her. She did, stiff. Trunks just stayed silent, looking into oblivion in front of her, elbows on knees, head on her locked fingers. She wanted to be near her mother, but this Bulma wasn't her. What could she tell her now that she requested her presence? How to monitor Vegeta? How to encourage him? What type of robots to give him? How to force him to call it quits and sleep? How dangerous the Super Saiyan transformation was? Nothing made sense. She'd find out on her own. None of this was necessary. She needn't intervene. Her mind circled back to the truth. I miss my mother.